Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to have you with us this morning. This morning, we're going to be starting a new series, and the series is called Follow, Discipleship for a New World. And in this series, we're going to be unpacking the kind of foundations of what it looks like to have making disciples at the heart of what it means to be church. In terms of our culture and our program, when everything is focused around how do you make disciples? And so we're going to be unpacking the principles of that in this series called Follow. And this morning, we're going to start with the first principle. And the first principle of our disciple-making culture is simply this: one person hungry for wholeness. And the next couple of weeks, we're going to take that one line, one person hungry for wholeness, and we're going to unpack what it means. Next week, Paul is going to be talking about what we mean by wholeness. But it's my job this morning to talk about what we mean by hungry. So one person hungry for wholeness as we start this discipleship series. Now, the text that I'm going to work with this morning, we've just heard read for us. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount. It's Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, and it has this line where Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." And I just want to take some time for us to think about, what does that actually mean? So let's think about the sentence to begin with. Those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they shall be filled. Let's just break that down into three component parts. Righteousness is not a word that we're used to hearing today, but it really means to be in right relationship with God. Righteousness is about a rightness, about our walk with God, our experience of God, our knowledge of Him. So being right with God. And then hunger and thirsting there, Jesus is using as a metaphor to talk about dependence, even desperation. That is, in the same way as a human body needs to hunger and thirst for food and water lest it dies, there needs to be a level of desperation and dependence about being right with God. And then these ideas of blessed are those, and they will be filled. What do blessed and filled mean? Well, that kind of means about human flourishing, human satisfaction, being fulfilled in life. And so you put those three ideas together, and Jesus is saying in this beatitude, this Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they shall be filled. What he's saying is, in the same way as your physical body needs food and water just to exist, you have to have the same level of dependence and desperation about living your life in right relationship with God if you are to flourish as a human being, if you are to thrive as a human being, if your life is to have purpose, if it's to have fruit, if it's to have a sense of destiny about it, then we have to hunger and thirst after being right with God. Now, that's actually a really big idea in the Bible, as you heard Paul talking about earlier from Psalm 42. As the deer pants for water, so my soul longs for you. There's this idea that you don't just drift into knowing God. There's got to be a real determination. There's got to be a real longing to know God in order to meet with Him. The Old Testament, the Israelite nation, they used to say, you have to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. There's this kind of longing that is required if we are going to follow. That we won't just drift into knowing God, we have to be entirely intentional about it. Now, this is a big idea, but it leads to one of those terrible words that gets overused in Christian churches all the time and has become sort of a stick we beat each other with. And the word that we derive from all this stuff about hungering and thirsting is the word commitment. We need to be committed. Christians need to be committed to Jesus. Christians need to be committed to the church. And actually what happens is it's a word used by people who think they are committed about people who they think lack commitment. And it becomes this really sort of aggressive kind of word in churches where we just kind of lack commitment, and all we need, the only answer that we really need is more people, more committed. You know, the older generation look down on the younger generation and they say they lack commitment. It's not like we were in our day. And this commitment thing just becomes really uncomfortable. As my old college principal used to say, he said, commitment, he said, we've just got a whole bunch of filleted Christians. They have no backbone. The only reason they're standing up is they're standing so close together. What we need is commitment. And I don't know about you, but I'm just sick and tired of the commitment word in church. It doesn't help anyone. So what did Jesus mean when he said we need to hunger and thirst after righteousness if we want to be filled? I want to say a couple of things about that this morning, to take that hunger and thirsting to a new level of understanding and away from this tired old stick that we try and beat each other with about commitment. The first thing I want to say is this: everybody has a hungry heart. I don't know if you know that song by Bruce Springsteen, but it's an absolute classic. Anyway, it's a great song. Everybody has a hungry heart. You see, the Bible says in the book of Genesis, says that human beings are made in the image of God. And in John's letters in the New Testament, it says that God is love. So that means that if we're made in the image of God, if we resemble God in some way, if we are made in his likeness, then that means that every human being is made to love. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we have the capacity to love. I'm saying that human beings have a compulsion to love. We can't help but love stuff because we're made in the image of a God who is loving. Now, in an ordered world where everything is good, we love others before we love ourselves. In a distorted world where everything has gone wrong, we love things and we love ourselves more than we do people. Sin entering the world when everything goes wrong doesn't take away love, it just distorts love. And so we now live in a world where everybody has a compulsion to love, but our loves get distracted. And the thing about love is that when we love something, when we really, really like something, it's like a center of gravity that just pulls our lives. We kind of drift towards what we love. We spend our time, we spend our thought life, we spend our money, we create our relationships around what we love. Let me give you an example. Let's think that, there's a young girl who is absolutely passionate about football. So her intellectual capacities are taken up following podcasts and Twitter feeds and reading all the sports articles around football because she loves football. So it takes up her intellectual capacity to a degree. But then in her leisure time, then the time she wants to kick back and relax, what does she do? She watches lots of football on TV, wherever she can see it. That's how she relaxes because she's gravitating to what she loves. But then, of course, there comes a financial commitment because that's when you get your Sky Sports contract. That's when you get your season ticket for the club you follow because your money follows what you love. And then, of course, when you're going to hang out with your friends, you want to spend time with friends who are passionate about the same things as you are. And so your passion and love for football begin then to shape your social circle and your friendships. And you multiply that over 20 or 30 years, the intellectual time, the relaxing time, the way you spend your money, your social networks, and that shapes the destiny of your life. I know this is true because I've spent the last 30 years of my life taking people's funerals, and I know how their lives get summed up. We gravitate our whole lives to what we love, and what we love ends up shaping our destiny. Now, this is what we never factored in when churches talked about commitment. When churches talked about commitment, they didn't factor in the fact that actually we've all got a hungry heart. We are all already committed to something. We are all already going after something that we love. And so what Jesus is saying here is, for goodness sake, if your whole life is going to be shaped by what you are going after, what you love, then please make sure that what you love will satisfy you, will help you flourish, will be good and true, will bring a richness to your life and to others' life. Don't spend your whole life going after something that you will not be able to hold on to, that you will inevitably lose. When Jesus said, those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they shall be filled, he was saying that only God can satisfy the longings of our lives and the longings of our heart. We have to go after what will nourish us and fulfill us. When churches talk about commitment, it's as if we lacked commitment somewhere else already. No, all of us, it's the human condition. Our whole lives will be shaped by what we prioritize. So let's, for goodness sake, let's prioritize that which lasts even beyond death, the love of God. So that's the first idea about hungering and thirsting. Everybody's doing it. It's just a question of what are we going to hunger and thirst after. Rather than a stick to beat us with, it was a loving, gracious God appealing to us. Don't waste your life on will not satisfy you. The second idea is this. Not only does everybody have a hungry heart, but we all have a slow and a fast brain. And you can see on the screen here a couple of authors who have written about this, and it's this really growing idea in terms of neurological thinking about how the brain works, is that our brain basically has two mental systems of dealing with life, and they're pretty much independent, and they work at different speeds. The slow part of our brain is all about the reasoned decision making. It's all about objective decisions, commitments of the will. This is where self-discipline comes in. And this part of our brain works slowly and deals with one issue at a time. And then there's the fast brain. The fast brain is constantly whirring behind the scenes and is processing all sorts of information, because that doesn't deal with one thing, it deals with many things. It operates very fast, and instead of thinking it being operated by the will, it's being stimulated by our emotions and whatever is going on around us. And so these two systems work at the same time. So as you're trying to listen to me with your slow brain right now, your fast brain is processing all sorts of stuff about how comfortable your chair is, how fulfilling was your breakfast, do your legs need stretching, what's the temperature in the room, what else is happening, and your eyes are being distracted elsewhere. Maybe there's a message, you're watching this on the phone, a Facebook message comes in, and you think, oh, I better just respond to that. That's your fast brain. And so we've got the slow brain and the fast brain dealing independently, largely, with different bits of information. Now, here's the thing. Unless in both of those parts of our brain we are hungering and thirsting after righteousness, our discipleship is never even going to get off the ground. Let's take each one and let me explain what I mean. So at the slow brain level, we have to decide whether Jesus is Lord or not. We have to decide whether he's the way, the truth, and the life. We have to weigh up the evidence, and then we have to weigh up our commitment. Are we all in? Are we going to abandon our lives with reckless abandon to the Jesus Christ who we believe is Lord? Does he demand my soul, my life, my all? Are we going to commit and say, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain? Are we all in? And there's a kind of monopoly jail sort of bit at this point. You know, that bit in the Monopoly game where it says, do not pass go, do not collect £200. You know, we don't pass go unless with our slow brain, at some point we say, okay, I submit my life completely to Jesus Christ. Now that's really hard for people in the West to do, because the trouble is we're so complacent and comfortable that we're not really hungry and thirsty for God. Why do we need him? And it's not until we actually come to that point of desperation where we stop making excuses that the way I am is just the way I was brought up, or it's my culture, or it's my, it's my personality weakness, or it's my character trait, and people just have to love me or leave me. Until we get to that point of saying, no, I am a sinner. I fall short of the glory of God. He is my only hope. I'm desperate for him. Unless we get to that point, our Christian journey doesn't even begin. Unless we own our sin, we can never give it away to Jesus, who died on the cross so that we could be forgiven. There comes a point in all of our lives where we have to count the cost and with the slow brain decide, am I all in? And until we make that decision, our Christian journey doesn't begin. You can't become a Christian by saying, well, I'll give this 6 months at 50% and see what happens. It just doesn't work like that. We're either all in or it's nothing. And so at a slow brain level, we have to say, okay, Jesus Christ, I commit to you my life. One of the mental images I have when I think about this whole life surrender, this decision of the will, is one of the things I have in my mind is my mate Steve, who I was part of a church with back in the days in Worthing, and Steve with his wife was part of our church, but he was one of those guys who had lost his way in his marriage, and he got into an extramarital affair, and he left his wife for a period of time, and then by a whole number of events, he just had to come and say, I have been so wrong. And so we talked about what that would look like. And I remember the first Sunday that Steve was back in church, and it was a communion service. And we'd said to Steve, this is too early for you to take bread and wine because it says you eat and drink judgment on yourself. We need to work through a process with you and your wife right now. And as I was breaking the bread and pouring the wine, I could just hear somebody crying at the back of the church. And when the people started to serve the bread and wine through that church building, I just saw Steve walk from the back of the church, walk to the front, and he just lay face on the ground in front of the communion table. And it was a very, very, very powerful moment. And it wasn't like the rest of the church was looking at him and saying, yeah, that's right, you need to repent, you've done something terribly wrong. It was actually that Steve was setting a bar for all of us about what it looks like to hunger and thirst after righteousness at that slow brain level. I am making a conscious, deliberate surrender of my whole life to God. Christianity doesn't start without that. But then we need to move finally to this other bit, the fast brain, this bit that behind us, which doesn't think in rational decisions one at a time, but is constantly responding to stimuli and focus and emotions and everything that's around us, and it is flying off in all directions all the time. Because you see, our commitment at a slow brain level to hunger and thirst after Jesus can be completely hijacked by our fast brain. And if you need evidence of this, just look at the way your YouTube algorithm shows what you're interested in. And let me talk to you about my YouTube algorithm. So I might decide halfway through a stressful day, I think, I know, I'm losing a bit of perspective here. I'm going to listen to Tim Hughes singing a worship song. That would be great, and I'll just center on God for a moment. That'd be great. So I go to YouTube, and I start to look for Tim Hughes, but actually down the side comes in Brian O'Driscoll's Greatest Tries. And here's this marvellous rugby player, and I love rugby, and I think, that'd be exciting. I'll just watch 2 minutes of Brian O'Driscoll's Greatest Tries. Well, at that point, the algorithm's got me. Because as soon as I get to that, remember, I'd gone there to worship Jesus, but now it's rugby's greatest ever tackles. And I think, 2 minutes on that, that'd be great. But by now, the YouTube algorithm is making a decision about what sort of person is looking at YouTube right now. So then it switches from the greatest rugby tackles ever made to medieval battles and knights. And lo and behold, within 30 seconds, I'm watching Russia versus Ukraine in a full-on remake of a medieval battle. And then, because it's already decided that I'm a bloke of a certain age looking at these ridiculous things, when I went there to start watching a worship video, I end up watching tree felling fails, as all these trees get chopped down and crash into houses. I mean, who wouldn't like to watch that? And lo and behold, 25 minutes later, I've gone there to worship, my slow brain had been committed to, I want to take 5 minutes to be with Jesus, and 25 minutes later, my fast brain has just hijacked all of that because it's responded to all those stimuli. And do you know what? Even while some of you have been listening to this talk, you've already answered 3 messages on Facebook because they've come in on your phone and you've been hijacked by your fast brain and haven't been listening to what I say. So don't just laugh at me. So the challenge is that when we say we're going to hunger and thirst after righteousness, if we're going to be filled, that's not just at the level of a hungry heart. We've got to want to follow Jesus. It's not just at the level of our slow brain where we decide to commit to following Jesus. It's got to be about all these habits and rhythms and the things we do with our money and our time, the things that actually shape our destiny. And the scariest thing of all is that in our consumer culture, this superpower of consumerism spends billions of pounds advertising to us, and notice what it does. It never, ever addresses the slow brain. It never addresses, why this car is better than that car. No, it always addresses our fast brain with a lure, just with a kind of little hint of something extra, and we're distracted and we go for it. And all the time, every single day, our fast brain is being discipled not by Jesus, but by people who are trying to sell us stuff, by YouTube, by social media, taking us in a direction in which our commitments to Jesus are undermined by our practice because our fast brain hijacks our slow brain. So I'll give you an example. You decide as a follower of Jesus you want to get up early in the morning and pray. But at 10 o'clock the previous night, as you're scrolling through Facebook, you see a link to a new series that starts. You think, that looks good. Oh, it's an hour long. Well, I'll just watch 5 minutes. You don't watch 5 minutes. You end up going to bed at midnight because you watched that and the subsequent one because it was so exciting. Lo and behold, you don't get up in the morning to pray because you're too tired from the night before. Your commitment in your slow brain has been hijacked by your commitment by your fast brain. You decide, for example, that you want to give more money to God's kingdom. But when you go to order a birthday present for your friend on Amazon, you say, oh, that's a nice coat. That's a bit expensive. Can't afford that all this month. Better pay that over 2 months. Oh, I'll just do that now. And your fast brain hijacks your slow brain commitment to follow Jesus. Unless we are committed to joining the dots between our heart, our slow brain, and our fast brain, we will never know what it is to hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. What does it mean to hunger and thirst after righteousness? It means that you know that Jesus is your only hope, and you know that he can ask you to do anything. There's nothing you won't do. And if you can't answer yes to those 2 things, we probably haven't learned what it is to hunger and thirst after righteousness. So when we're talking about a discipleship culture, we're talking, first of all, about having a hungry heart, recognizing that we're all being shaped all the time. Are we going to be shaped in the image of Jesus? We're talking about a slow brain commitment to the things of his kingdom so that we decide with our will, objectively laying down our lives. And then thirdly, it's about that fast brain commitment, joining the dots with all our habits, all those happy places we go to, all those things that we do to relax, all our relationships, how we spend our money, everything caught up in the lordship of Jesus Christ. That's why teaching doesn't make disciples, because we're being shaped by a community all the time about how we are to live our lives, and it needs being part of an alternative community, the church, to be powerful enough to help one another, pray for one another, hold us each other to account so that we can live this different life. So that's got some implications for us as we think about church going forward as a disciple-making movement. The first thing is this: discipleship isn't for everyone. Discipleship is only for the hungry. And in the same way as everybody who goes to church isn't a Christian, everybody who calls themselves a Christian isn't necessarily a disciple. The truth is, many of us are just very complacent about where we are. We don't hunger and thirst after God. And so discipleship is never a program you can take a church through. Discipleship always has to be by invitation for those who are hungry. You can't tick a box of the church and say discipleship's done. We have to all take personal responsibility for our own spiritual growth. That's one of the amazing things that's happening in COVID. Those people who just got used to coming to church on a Sunday thinking that their spiritual needs were going to be met and fulfilled that way, it doesn't work like that anymore. We have to take responsibility for our spiritual growth because that's a kingdom principle. Those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they shall be filled. I finish with one story. I was at a big Christian festival a number of years ago, and there were about 1,500 teenagers in the room, all under 18. And, it was an amazing evening. The music was incredible. The preaching had been really inspirational. The lights were low. People were really moved emotionally. And the preacher said, now, I want those of you who want to come up and follow Jesus for the rest of your lives to just leave your seats and come up to the front. And hundreds of these teenagers came and just queued up around the stage. And as I got up, I was responsible for leading that venue, and I thought, what do I do? What do I say now? And I had a moment's what I think was inspiration. So the music was playing quietly in the background, and the lights were low, and people were all gathering around, and I just clapped my hands and said, okay, stop, lights up, music cut. And everybody looked really kind of perturbed. And I just simply said, okay, following Jesus will take more than the emotion of this moment. For those of you who are really serious to give your lives to Jesus, I'll see you here, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. It was a great moment. The rest of my team kind of went, what? 6 a.m.? And the kids were really confused. But I said, look, it's following Jesus is tough. It's got to be more than a commitment of the emotion of this moment. Go home and think about it. And if you really want to give your life, your soul, your all, then I'll see you at 6 in the morning. I got up at 5:45. We'd had to arrange stewards and prayer ministry team and all the rest of it. And as I walked round to the venue, I thought I might see a dozen people, maybe 20 at tops. And the queue went all the way round the building. It took us hours to pray for those young people as they decided to commit their lives to following Jesus. Are you really hungry and thirsty for righteousness? Jesus says, only if you are will you be filled. But it's got to be at both levels of our brain. At the slow level of our commitments and our thinking, but also at the fast level of joining up all of our habits and instincts under the lordship of Jesus Christ. That's the journey of what it means to be a disciple. That's what it means to follow in this new world. You've got to be hungry. Let's pray. And so, Jesus, in these moments, we recognize that you know us better than we know ourselves. You look right into our hearts. We can say what we think, but you know how it really is. Jesus, please, would you come by your Spirit to help me will and act according to your good purpose. However long or short it is I've been following you, Lord, help me to hunger and thirst after you as if my whole life depended on it, because actually it does. Jesus, hear my prayer for the glory of your name in my life and in this church. Amen.